The first thing that you want to do in Arkham Horror Living Card Game is to select one of the 5 basic character types. There's Guardian, Seeker, Mystic, Rogue, and finally Survivor. Guardian-style characters are great if you like using weaponry, whether it's handguns or machetes. This is a great character for you to play. If you like beating up the bad guys and fighting them, this is who you want to be. The next is Seeker, and this is a really key part of the game, is getting clue tokens to advance the stories in the game. The Seeker is a great character class to play to pull those clue tokens off in a very quick and effective manner. The Seeker, though, isn't very combat-oriented, so you're going to have to rely on the other characters. Seekers typically have a high intellect score, but some of their other skills are a little bit lacking. The next is the Mystic, which is almost like the Sorcerer in Arkham Horror. You have a wide variety of spells and a wide variety of sort of ritualized artifacts and relics that you can have at your disposal. These characters excel at really versatility. They typically have a really strong willpower ability score, which is used to cast their spells. Their spells in general are fairly powerful, but when you're drawing chaos tokens, you can sometimes have the spell backfire on you, and all sorts of awful effects can occur to you and sometimes your party based upon what you draw from the chaos bag. So if you're someone that likes to play like a spellcaster style character, the Mystic is for you. Rogues are your deceptive, sneaky style characters that typically have a pretty decent agility. They also have the ability to generate resources from various means effectively. These characters are really fun if you like evading the enemy as opposed to directly fighting them out in the open. Use bad luck to your advantage by playing the Survivor class. These characters have a host of skills and abilities that when things go wrong, you can actually benefit from that in the game. It's a lot of fun to play. It's a little bit strange when you first start playing this character class, but once you get into it, I think you'll really enjoy it. Once you've selected the character class that you want to play for the campaign, go ahead and take all of the different characters of that class and put them out on the table from your collection. What you want to look at is their special abilities and their ability scores. A lot of these characters have some really, really cool special abilities and some fun effects that really make the game shine, and it gives them a unique personality. Once you've selected one, start thinking about the theme, how you're going to build that character, what things you want to potentially include in that deck. This is one of the most fun and exciting parts of the game, is starting a new character and really putting that build together and thinking through what you want it to do. After you choose your character class, the next part of deck building is going to be your assets. As a general rule, and this is just a general rule, I recommend putting roughly 10 assets in your deck to start with. Assets are going to form the core of your strategy. Assets typically remain in the game for long periods of time, so this is the best place to start when you're doing your deck building. You've already selected your character class, you know what sort of special abilities your character has. Now start building those assets around the character, and I'm going to go into some of my recommendations for doing this. The first thing that we're going to talk about are offensive cards. These are typically weapons, but they can also be spells as well in the case of some of the Mystic cards. Look for cards that do bonus damage. You know, something that's +1, +2, or up and up and up. The game is somewhat timed, and what that means is that you're constantly putting Doom tokens out every turn, and that will end the game. Every single action you take, therefore, matters. Think of it as almost like a timed event. If you're only hitting for 1 point of damage every attack, it's going to take you a long time to bring down those enemies, and it's going to stall out the game. So always look for cards that have some bonus damage associated with it. I'm not saying don't ever use cards that don't have it, but it hits harder and it's a lot more impactful to the game. The next thing I want you to look out for is when you're using some of these cards, a lot of them have either charges or ammunition associated with them. And just understand that when you put it out, you're going to have a limited number of uses. Typically, these are around 3 or 4 different charges that are on the card itself. So be really mindful of that. And then also be on the lookout for stuff that doesn't have ammunition. So I always try to recommend to people, put some weapon cards in your deck that don't have ammunition. And then that way, no matter what happens, you can use it over and over and over again, and it's not going to run out. Then the final thing I want to talk about is that some of the weapons are two-handed, and what that means is you can only have one of those weapons out in play, typically. So if you have, let's say, the baseball bat out, and then you want to put out something else like the fire axe, you're going to have to discard the baseball bat to bring out the fire axe. Be really mindful of that. I see a lot of new players, they get a little bit frustrated when they're using their deck for the first time and they have a nice two-handed weapon out, and then they want to bring a second weapon out and they can't because both of their hands are full. So be really, really mindful of that. If you're going to use those two-handed weapons, just be aware of that and make sure that you plan for that. One final note on really all of these upgrade cards and assets in your deck. Think about the future. If you're playing one of the Arkham Horror campaigns, you're going to be going through anywhere from 3 to 8 missions, depending on which campaign that you're playing. So think of it as the future. Once you start getting experience points, can you upgrade certain items? You know, case in point, the 45 automatic is a card that you can upgrade. So if you like playing the 45 automatic, plan for the future. Look through your collection of cards and see what some of these cards can turn into and what they can advance into in the future. And that might help you for deck building in the future once you start gaining that experience and you start completing those missions. Next, we're going to talk about allies, and I recommend for new players and new decks, just go ahead and put a pair of allies into the deck. It's the same one, just put 2 copies into your deck. Allies do 2 different things. First, they give you some sort of benefit or bonus. Oftentimes, it's one of the ability score bonuses that you get, which is a fantastic upgrade for you. You're going to be spending less skill cards to make those skill checks later. Secondarily, and a lot of players kind of don't see this when they first start playing Arkham, but they have health and sanity values, your allies. So if you get hit, your allies can actually soak up that damage, which improves your character survivability, and it keeps you in the game longer. One other thing I see sometimes with new players, they'll put in a bunch of allies, and I kind of, don't recommend that. And the reason why is that you can only have one ally out in play when you first start the game. So if you have a ton of allies, it's going to bog down your hand. So you're going to have a bunch in your hand and you can't really play them. So I just recommend having one set when you first build your deck. Finally, I'm going to talk about the last class of cards, and these are sort of accessory or body style items that you can use to enhance your characters. We've kind of talked about the other assets, and by now you probably have roughly 8 assets in your deck. So the remaining 2 slots, go ahead and start looking at some of these other cards in the game. Some of them will do things like healing. Another host of cards, and these are very valuable, they allow you to draw additional cards and keep your hand size nice and strong. Always be on the lookout for those cards. And then finally, there's a bunch of these talent cards that allow you to spend resources, and it typically will buff up 2 different ability scores that you have. So be really conscious of having those in your deck. I think having a couple of those, especially if you have a high resource deck, is a really good option to round out the last of your asset slots. Now we're going to move into the event cards in your deck. These are going to constitute, in my opinion, roughly 12 of the 30 cards that you're going to be placing into your deck. First and foremost, I'm going to mention the emergency cache. This is a card, I think, that really shines in any deck. You play it, it's a 0 cast event, and you gain 3 resources. It's really, really good to have 2 copies of these in any deck. I really haven't found a deck that I wouldn't put that into. The rest of these events are going to be sort of theme-based around what your character does. So try to focus on the theme. Is the person an attacker? Is a person an investigator? Do they like to do evasion? Are they a spellcaster? Things of that nature. There's another set of cards that allow you to move for free without consuming an action, or they allow you to move to the far side of all of the locations very quickly. So keep that in mind. Something what I want to recommend is that when you're putting your events together, try to look for a lot of them that are 1 and 2 resource cost. The more that you have that are in the 3 to 4 range, it's going to be really unlikely that you're going to be able to have the resources to play those. But these nice 0 cost events and the 1 cost events, these are really great. You can have them in your hand and you can use them almost at any time because 1 resource isn't that much. 2 resources is pretty economical, but once you start hitting 3 or 4 resources to play a card, it's going to take you many, many turns to recover. And in Arkham Horror, sometimes you don't have that many turns to get the job done correctly. So to sum it up, now focus on 12 event cards that are based around your assets and your character, and then this is going to build out most of the flesh of your deck. Finally, what I want to talk about are probably the least important cards in your deck. You still need them, but they don't have as much impact as the permanent assets and the events in your deck. And these are going to be the skill cards, which have the symbol at the top. These are going to allow you to enhance your skill checks when you're drawing chaos tokens out of the chaos bag themselves. So the first thing I want to recommend, and this should be pretty obvious, but if it's not, put 2 copies of Unexpected Courage into your deck. With the question mark icon, you can use it for anything. And it's 2 of those icons as well, so that's really versatile. Next, I really like these skill cards that are dedicated 1 per ability score. So this one is dedicated to the agility ability score. So when you play it, you're going to add 2 of the agility icons to the skill check, and it also allows you to draw a card. So this is a really good way to keep your deck sort of flowing. So even though you're spending a card, you're getting 1 back. So I think these are great. Other cards I really enjoy for the skills, and there's a whole set of these as well, 1 for each ability score, is that when you start taking a lot of sanity damage, and that's pretty easy to do in this game. A lot of the characters maybe only start with 5 or 6 sanity. So if you've lost 3 sanity, you can use these cards to your advantage. It actually adds 4 icons of that ability. So be on the lookout for these cards as well if they're in your collection. Next, we're going to move on to some of the more dedicated ones. And what I want to recommend is that look for cards with a lot of the question marks. I think these are very versatile. Sometimes they have a little bit of a catch to play, and sometimes it's a little bit situational. But being able to have 3 icons is really amazing. And then another thing too is be on the lookout for some of these cards. And this is one that has 3 different icons. It's very versatile. So you can use it to buff up a lot of your event cards that you're playing, a lot of your attack options, evasion abilities, spells, whatever it is that you're doing. And so these are really good as well. And then finally, don't rule out cards that really add something to your deck theme. So in this case, we have Vicious Blow. Although it only adds 1 icon, it allows you to add 1 damage to an attack. So if you're a damage dealing sort of deck and you want just that extra little push to wipe the enemies out faster, be on the lookout for these skill cards as well. And these are really beneficial. So to sum it up, I'm going to suggest that you put 8 skill cards into your deck and kind of go from there. You're going to look at the overall mixture and you're going to adjust it accordingly, and I'll show you kind of how to do that next. Once your deck has been put together and you have your 30 core cards, you're going to go ahead and add your character weakness to the deck. The character also usually comes with a few cards that are just designed for them. So you're going to go ahead and add those into your deck. And then finally, you're going to add 1 random weakness. And as your collection grows, the number of cards that you can draw randomly and put into your deck will also increase dramatically. So it's kind of fun as your collection grows. The amount of options for your weakness also grows as well. When I'm done putting my deck together, what I like to do is remove all the weaknesses and do sort of an opening hand assessment. It's going to simulate what my first hand in a game is going to look like, taking into account the mulligan. I'm going to show you what that looks like. In this case, I built an Ursula Downs deck. So I'm going to take my draw deck and I'm simply going to draw 5 cards off the top of the deck. And this is going to simulate what my opening hand would look like. And then I'm going to take these cards, I'm going to look through them and see, would that be a suitable opening hand? And if not, I'm going to draw an additional 5 cards to look to see what my hand would look like if I mulliganed all of the first 5 cards. And I'm going to repeat this process 2 more times. And what this does is it allows you to take a look at right out of the gate, right when you start playing. Your first turn is usually the most important when you're trying to set up your deck strategy. Do you have the cards you need to be successful for your strategy in your opening hand? And if you don't, can you get to those cards by using the mulligan rule? So think of it as you're looking at sets of 10 cards to assess the strength of your deck. By doing this, I have found numerous times that there's something not quite right about the deck, and I can make some critical card changes before I start playing. Once you start playing a campaign, you've kind of locked those cards in, and your deck is kind of set. It's going to cost you experience points to replace any of those cards, even if they have 0 pips on them. So this is something I highly recommend. Go ahead and try it out for yourself. Do an opening hand assessment on your newly created deck. I want to thank you today for joining me with this video. Hopefully you've learned some tips and tricks, so next time when you're building an Arkham Horror living card game deck, you kind of know what to do. You know where to start. Thanks again for your time, and as always, have fun gaming.